Hello there, sword fans. Today I'm going to do a members type only video where I solicited some questions a few weeks ago and I said I would do a members video, and this is that. So let me know if the format's good, and if it is, then I will try to do them again sometime. I will also try to be more brief and succinct than I typically am. So if you're tuning in for exceptionally long rambles, the goal is to be a little bit more to the point, if that's possible for me. Anyway, let me know what you think. If it's doable, then hopefully this format and the ease of editing is something workable for me to include a little bit more frequently than I have been anyway. First question is from Leon, and he asks, love to hear your views on custom swords from American swordsmiths in other countries, how they compare to Nihonto, what they get right, wrong, and some nuanced details about Nihonto, what details about Nihonto are missed or omitted from handling. So it's a good question, and the thing that I noticed most in comparison, I suppose, is shape. Japanese sword shapes tend to have a curve that flows throughout a little bit, and a lot of more modern smiths or smiths outside of Japan tend to have straighter nakago. They don't flow the same way. That's one thing that gets missed. Some blades, antique blades anyway, had shoulders, or there was a little bit more taper, a little bit more nuance to the shape. Small but noticeable if you're really looking at it, as well as some flair and kind of reinforcement on the Kasaki area. That's not always hit by swordsmiths outside of Japan, modern or not. Sometimes it is, not always. It's fair to say, though, that I don't know if anything is necessarily missing exactly. There's shape is the one thing that I see maybe that has the largest departure if you're being really nuanced about it. But beyond that, not a huge. I'm sure that it's a rabbit hole that I could jump down, and there's a lot of little nuanced things that I could pick apart. But I have to have one example. Grand scale shape, habakis tend to be a little bit more on the tight side, and they tend to be a little bit larger. Not that is ahistoric, but I suppose they're not always representative of the period. Though most of what I hear being made from custom swordsmiths outside of Japan are swords that are made for Iaido, and they're usually bought or commissioned by practitioners. Not always. I'm speaking kind of in generalizations, but I think a lot of practitioners tend to buy them, and they're probably looking for a tool that's going to be suitable for Iaido or whatever their practice is. And so you don't see a whole lot of variation, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I've had a number of Rick Barrett blades over my tenure in sword collecting, you might say, and while the bulk of them have been kind of Shinogi, Zakuri style blades that look not dissimilar, but a more refined version of what maybe comes out of China, but a shape that you're probably very familiar with. That doesn't mean that that's the entirety of what Rick Barrett has made. I've also had swords that were of different geometries, that were light and lively, that were nimble and itty-bitty, that were really, really big and folded. I've had a lot of. He's certainly a capable smith, full of curiosity, and has explored it quite a bit in his craft, and I've been fortunate enough to have some of those pieces in my hand. The bulk of them that I've owned, though, have been a little bit more standard shape, but I'd have to assume that that's because that's what the person that initially ordered it wanted. They wanted a sword that they could use in a style they were familiar with, or at least that's what I'm speculating. But if I had to pick one nuanced little detail, it would probably just be the shape, and particularly as I go nakago, below the nakago, it seems that there's a lot more straightening in the modern stuff, especially from smiths outside of Japan. Not all, though. That's not always the case, but that would be one thing that I would say I would commonly see as a difference. Second question from Real Swords. I would love to hear your thoughts on parenting through a swordsman's eyes. There we go. I have 1.5-year-old. So, yes, parenting. You just have to do the best you can with the kid you got. That's basically what it amounts to. My daughter, when she was very young, was not daring or really pushing the rules. She understood danger, and I thought it best to educate and then, let see what happens from there. And fortunately, my daughter wasn't rambunctious or curious in such a way that she wanted to go and play with the swords when I wasn't looking. I just said, you can touch them anytime. I untabooed it, if you will. I said they're sharp and they're dangerous, and I showed her, and I took away the idea that it was naughty, and I said that, hey, if you want to play with them, just let me know, and we can look at them, but you have to be careful. They're dangerous, and just through education and her personality, I never really had to lock swords or knives up. They could be within her reach, and it wasn't ever a problem. She never was running around with them or doing rambunctious, overly dangerous, silly things with the swords around. I don't know if that'll be the same for for my son. He might be a different character altogether, and if that was the case, I just have to play it by ear and evaluate when when I encounter it. But if she was curious and doing it, they'd have to get locked up and put away if I had to worry about turning my back and then having child play with a 4-foot razor blade. At the same time, I think a big part of what that had to do with was that it wasn't taboo. I said, you can play with a sword. I will teach you to use a sword. If you want to see a sword, I will talk to you about it. And it got to be kind of a dumb dad thing, and she just wasn't into it. And still, to this day, it doesn't even dawn on her that she plays video games in an armory, basically. I just don't know if that will be the same. I don't know if that will be the same for your experience. Every kid is different, and you do the best you can with what you got. The idea, though, is not to put them in danger, and at the same time not remove every element of danger, and to coach them to hopefully be productive, safe members of society that respect deadly weapons, right? And what's the best way to get them there? And in the case of my daughter, it was just demystify and not, make them available if she was interested, and then she just didn't push any of the boundaries there. Hopefully that helps. I don't know if the next one will be the same, though, so I might have more news in the coming years. Next question is from Eric Hussein. Great pick. As I've long run out of general katana sword-related questions outside specifics on specific swords, that is, I've really got nothing. I'll let the others come up with some. If you get time after those are answered, I would be interested to hear your thoughts on parenting through a swordsman's eyes. What do you plan to do when your son starts to show interest, and how do you manage the balance of work, life, family, swords, YouTube? It's only 24 hours in a day. Good questions. I answered some questions around parenting, though I may not have answered real swords questions in that I focused on how to make your young child not have a deadly fascination with swords where they run with scissors effectively. So how to balance that so that they're respectful around the object and not necessarily parenting. But since the question has come up twice, I don't know that I incorporate swordsmanship in parenting as much as some of the traits maybe manifest themselves in your personality more broadly. Trying to take ego out of things is a big part. Humility, I try to do that, but generally my take on parenting isn't necessarily through swordsmanship. It's really, I don't filter so much. So that's an oddity around parenting for me. I don't filter, but I want to put in contrast that I am not trying to give anyone parenting advice. I am of the impression that you know your child better than I do or anyone else does, and you know what's good, right? So if you're approaching it from a philosophy of you want to make a good person that's happy and productive, or whatever your version of a good human being is, and giving them the tools to do that, I think the parents probably know better, and so take the advice with a grain of salt. I'm not saying that what I do is the best way. It just seemed the best way with the child that I had. And that was my daughter. That's who I've had the most parenting experience with. And so I will say that I didn't filter anything for daughter, at least very, very little. So movies that were maybe beyond her age or topics that were beyond her age were open. And there was relatively little filtering that went in. And I would always try to explain as directly and honestly as I could if she had any questions, and try not to make her feel bad about asking. Try to always check my humility, my ego, the why ask and answer questions and be a source of knowledge. And I also try to make her think and come up with answers and ponder things herself. And so that's the other aspect. And as in the really young age, it's demystifying and answering questions and trying to give the building blocks so that they have tools necessary to do smart things later, and gradually working to where she is now. Now parenting is kind of letting go a little bit, and hopefully the structure and the tools are there, and letting her fall on her face, but in a controlled environment where support's there to pick her up. And so there's that, and letting go is a trickier thing now. So Got to let her spread her wings a little bit. Got to let her make mistakes, and sometimes that's equally hard. But yeah, either of those things are applicable maybe to teaching anything. When you start a subject, there's an inform and building of fundamental tools, and later in life you got to let somebody maybe get smacked in the face with a bokin a couple times in a controlled environment in order for them to progress. Not quite the same metaphor as parenting, but I suppose there's some similarities anyway. Not that I'm suggesting you smack your child with a bokin. That's not what I'm insinuating. But the parenting is always like, what's the best way to teach the person, give them the tools, and have them then be able to use those things in their life to pursue whatever happiness means to them. What do I do? What do I plan to do with my son when he shows interest? If he shows interest, that's not a guarantee, but if he does, then welcome to join class, and hopefully he will be better than me in relatively short order. If he has an interest in swords, then we will share an interest in swords, and I would imagine fun can be had. But I don't know if that will be the case right now. He shows a lot of interest in little cars, so maybe he'll be a gearhead, which is equally fine, whatever interests him. And how do I balance? In truth, sometimes I don't. That's that's probably the most honest I could be. Sometimes I don't balance. Generally, I try to have a priority, and family is at the top of that list between work and swords and whatnot. But yeah, I wish I had better tools. Sometimes you have to take from one to give to the other, and sometimes it's not a zero-sum game, and you can execute on all of them. Time management is good. I'm not the best at that, but that is helpful, and I'm very lucky to have a partner that supports my shenanigans and silliness, and is a very good balance for me, and we ebb and flow well together. So all of that tends to help, but I would say, how do I balance it? I don't necessarily. Obviously, you can kind of see I pause on YouTube when I need to, and put more when work demands it. Sometimes when my wife can take over, I can take over for her when work or some other event is pressing, and we have kind of a support structure with one another to kind of make sure the family is taken care of, and that we have time to do other things that are fun. But yes, through support and good decisions early in life, I put myself in a spot where I have a little bit of free time and an opportunity to pursue and share a hobby that I enjoy. But I'd be lying if I say it works out well all the time. It doesn't. I feel like I screw up and fail a lot, and I try to do better the next day, or try to figure my way out of it. I try not to take the mantra of, I fucked my way into this mess, now I can fuck my way out. And if I think a little harder, then sometimes I can't get it always balanced, but I can usually do something that is closer to good than bad. Hopefully that answers the question, Eric. Good question. Very solid question. Tengu asks, would the Beiser $560 sword, they need better names, be good Shinken for Iaido? Although it is S5 as a sword steel, they offer that as well. I don't know the differences between S5 and S7. Honestly, the Beiser sword was suitable for Iaido. I thought very highly of it. It was more durable, though. It didn't seem like the Iaido practice aspect of it was particularly good as much as the durability aspect. So if you're looking for a sword that is going to be durable, some order of magnitude more than other stuff in the price category, or at least stands a chance to be, then Beiser seems a worthy option. There wasn't anything that inherently detracted, but as I think about like the Ryan sword for $350, that was pretty close to similar functionality, and I think I like the feel of that one a little bit more from an Iaido perspective. Or I'd probably rather, if I was just doing Iaido, pick up an Iaito from Tizando. So if you want something that's good for Iaido, but also good to smack some stuff in the backyard and is going to hold up well, I would say yes. But if that smacking stuff in the backyard or the hold up aspect isn't good, the Beiser stuff didn't inherently look or perform in some way that was amazing. and it was a little bit of a premium to get that steel, and that steel bore fruit when it came to smacking stuff. But again, if that's not the desire for what you're doing, then I would say probably not. Your money might be better spent elsewhere, or on a different option anyway. Follow up from Tengu: any options for a 33-inch Nagasa production blades? I don't know any. I know that there's been some 32-inch ones, but 33-inch, I can't say anything particularly comes to mind. You may be able to custom order one from one of those companies. I don't think Ronin has any. They might have an Okatana, but I don't think it's 33 inches. Doesn't mean that it won't be, but I don't think it's advertised that way. And yeah, shy of custom ordering one, things don't come to mind specifically. Yeah, not anything that comes to mind, unfortunately. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Joe, Steel Forge and Fire, sword and knife. The great Alcazar, again referring to my silly photo that I posted. Honestly, that's a great idea. You are definitely the man for the job. We can talk about the great stock sword market of our era with most options for all groups. Let's talk about our American bladesmiths. Is there a way we can have an American sword manufacturer with affordable price points, the beauty and historical elements of a katana, most well-rounded European sword company sword types? We could talk, those are all different topics. I don't know that I can answer all of those or even babble on too much because I'm trying to be a little bit more succinct. But could there be an American sword manufacturer that manufactured swords at a reasonable price point? I would imagine so, but I don't honestly know. If I looked at like Arms and Armor, they're very close, but if they made Japanese-style swords, I think a lot of the finish work that they struggle with, that would be a struggle for them, and I don't know that it would necessarily be accepted. Albion tried making katanas at some point. They did a couple of prototypes, and I don't think they would ever do it again. At least that's what Mike said. So getting somebody to make them and manufacture them that had a process that was refined enough to machine them out, it's not that it couldn't happen, but I would say it's probably an unlikely eventuality. It is an interesting subject, though, but the manufacturing required to do it and to get something that preserved those historical elements and stuff like that would be not impossible, but certainly a challenge. And I don't know what the break even would have to be for somebody to do it inside the U.S. But anyway, yeah, it's a neat topic. Maybe one day, Joe, you can ditch the camera work, jump into the CNC side of things, and see if you can figure out a way to mass produce swords inside the United States. Guns N' Roses. Hi, Master. Nope, that's not me, but I appreciate it. Can you remember how to clean and oil a sword, please? I do have a video on it. You pull the peg out from the middle of the sword. Most modern swords, the modern production stuff, don't come apart particularly easy. And if they do come apart, it's sometimes challenging to get them back together. So if you've gotten a bunch of water and moisture and humidity down in the Nakago, then you might want to pursue this. But otherwise, you can also just leave it on, wipe the blade off with oil or water or something like that, clean it off, dry it, and then oil the blade. And you can sometimes put some oil down in the habaki, just put a couple drops and let it kind of move around underneath the habaki, and sometimes it goes down in the Nakago and can abate some of the water that might have gotten down in there if you don't want to take the handle off. But realistically, it's just clean off whatever debris, grease, residue, adhesives, or whatever from water bottle cutting, if that's what you're doing, might be on the blade. Clean it off, dry it, and then apply oil. And usually apply oil to a rag and just lather up the blade and make sure that you've got it nice and evenly coated. And that's effectively it. To take the sword apart, you you would tap out the makugi, and then the handle should require like a knock on your wrist, and then it pops free. But that's typically on well-manufactured custom pieces or Nihonto or something like that. If you have a mass-produced blade out of China or the Philippines or some other location, they don't tend to come apart that easy, and oftentimes you even need a rubber mallet and sometimes a tool to hammer the Nikago off. And then when you do that, there's a little bit more cleaning to do. But if you get that far, you can pull the handle off, oil the blade, oil down on the Nikago. You can oil the Nikago as well. You don't have to, but you certainly can. There's an argument to be made to, keep the Nikago clean, even though it historically gets a patina from handling the Nikago. Whatever, you can oil the Nikago if you don't want it to get all rusty. Tap the fittings and stuff, get whatever loose debris out, put it back together, and hopefully it goes together as tight as it was before. Hopefully that helps. But I tend to oil them. That's not the traditional way of cleaning them. Not that pulling it apart is untraditional, but it's not specifically the most traditional way of doing the cleaning. That's just the way I do it. Modern oils, and I apply it. I very rarely take the sword fully apart, as in pull the peg, take all the sword pieces apart, oil the entirety of the blade. But if I'm cutting water bottles, or water in particular has gotten down the Nikago, or if I'm practicing in snow or rain or something like that, then I'll take it apart, do a full cleaning, and put it back together. Incidentally, if your handle and stuff gets all full of water, it is best to at least try to keep it on the blade. The wood can warp and stuff like that, and if it's not on the blade, it might not go back when it's done warping from being wet and drying back out. But being wet can also rust it on the tang. So fine balance of things, anyway. Hopefully that helps you. Some more follow-up questions from Tengu. What do you think of the Hondura or Hayoten Tsuba offered by Saido Shop? I have to look up what those are. They look neat. 10,000 yen. What's that? Is that $1,000? No. It's $100. $100? I can't remember the exchange rate. $86 at current exchange rate. That seems a reasonable price for a cast fitting. Most of the stuff from Saido Shop is not bad. The castings look okay. It seems like a lot of the stuff they have is similar to what you would find at Tazando or Yamato, and so I don't know which one's cheaper, but the fittings in general look fine. And there's nothing inherently basically that would make me say they are bad. So if you happen to like them, then more power to you. The theme isn't my favorite, but if you like the look of them, then it doesn't really matter what I think. And nothing inherently about the fittings, from what I've seen from the castings in Japan, are bad. They're not the most remarkable quality, but it's just also a Tsuba for $86 and not $800. So if you like them, there we go. Another follow-up from Tengu. Any thoughts on JeanDenis Hernandez Shinken? I had the opportunity actually to buy one of his some years ago, and I missed it. They look fine. I haven't ever really played with one much, though, so I don't have any thoughts. I know he's a well-regarded smith, very capable, and people are fans of his work, and that he makes very nice stuff, and I don't really have any critiques or criticisms or something to give, but I don't know if he's still active in making. So if you can buy one and you're interested, it's very good. He's a well-regarded smith, and that's it. But it would depend on the sword. It's possible he made a total, turd of a sword too. So if you have an example that you're looking at purchasing, I'm certainly happy to take a look at it and critique further, but I can't. In general, I know he's a well-respected swordsmith. That's what I can say, and the works that I've seen from him have generally been pretty nice. And the last question: why the Steven Seagal look? I don't know. The fading glory, man. That's I didn't inherently choose to do the Steven Seagal look. It kind of chose me. I stopped doing haircuts after the COVID time came around, and I just haven't gotten to it. Initially, it started because most of the hairdressers that I knew got super COVID and were all very, very sick, and there wasn't a way to safely go out and do it, and it seemed like more of a risk. I work from home. I can pull my hair back, and at least from this angle, I don't look quite as much like a Dingle Fritz. But obviously, I don't hide it, and when it's flowing free, I look ridiculous. But I don't know. I've rolled this far, so I just keep it going. It's probably going to go in the not too distant future, though. I'm not sure how long I'm going to rock it. My wife already has won the right to call out whenever I get it cut, so it's probably not long for this world. But I've had it for this long, and I just kind of keep it going. I'm assuming that's what you mean. If you mean the fact that I'm pulling my hair back in a ponytail, I'm balding and gaining weight, then there might be more to it. I just answered the hair story. Ice cream and beer are the other ones, and yeah, that's it. Anyway, hopefully that answers your questions. Thanks everyone for asking them. I'm going to call it here. As always, cheers and thanks for watching.